We live in a time where masculinity is shamed and men don't know what it means to be a man. As a pastor and counselor, I've spent the better part of my life equipping and training others. My goal with this show is to translate my hard-earned experience into tools and tactics to help you become stronger as a man. This is the BraveCo podcast. I'm your host, Jason Bellet. What's up, BraveCo men? Today I am excited to have my good friend Greg Hendricks with us. Greg is on the BraveCo team. He's been with us for a couple months now, but this is kind of our introduction of Greg into to you guys. And so, man, I'm excited to introduce Greg. Greg is a father. He's a husband. Greg was a professional basketball player for quite a while. Ended up helping to coach the Supersonics as well. Greg was a pastor at the Rock in San Diego for a long time and has been an itinerant speaker and just a carrier of fire, man. If you know Greg, you know that everywhere he goes, he's just packing the heat. He spent a long time being a chaplain for several different teams in the NFL and other organizations. And so, man, Greg, I'm so stoked to have you on here. And for BraveCo, he is our liaison. So Greg travels and speaks and helps to champion what we're doing. We're building out some curriculum for churches this year. We just finished packaging that up. It's going to be ready to go in January. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But Greg is helping to bring life to that, helping to meet with churches and do all kinds of stuff. So, Greg, thank you so much, man, for coming on here. And I'm excited to have you.
Man, it's a joy and a privilege. I'm happy to be on, happy to chop it up and talk and encourage all the listeners who are going to be listening to this and watching this, man. It's a real treat and gift for sure.
One of the fun things last year is we brought you on before you came onto the team. We brought you in on one of our 5-day challenges. So if somebody's listening to this and going, gosh, what is a 5-day challenge? We used to do these 5-day challenges for BraveCo that were free. They were on Facebook, and we'd go live, right, for 5 nights in a row for like an hour and a half and just bring on some incredible speakers and fire the guys up. And so, man, when you came on earlier this year, it was awesome. The guys were just like, they were on fire. So they loved it. Yeah, just super fun.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. That was my first time ever doing it. And just to see all the hungry men, all of the interaction, it was just a real gift. And, what ended up happening from that moment too is that I had a lot of people individually reach out and just, say, hey, listen, you don't know how much your story impacted. I mean, you really don't know. I think most people, they're like, oh man, my story, who's that going to touch? Who's that going to help? And,
yeah,
I think everybody tends to maybe say that to themselves at some point. And the feedback was incredible. And so, the whole intention was just to kind of like fellowship, break bread, encourage, sharpen. And we saw a lot of fruit from that. And we saw a lot of people get really, really transform and get help. So, look forward to doing another one in the future. And it was a joy to do that one. And
that's cool, man.
Yeah, looking forward to building.
I love it. Well, listen, I want to dive into your story quite a bit, actually. And a lot of the reason why, if people have followed us for any amount of time, you've heard us talk about weaponizing your story. And to me, weaponizing your story means that you take the painful places of your life, even the shameful places of your life, and you use those to get other people free, and you don't hide those, and they become like the greatest areas of breakthrough for other people and in your life. And man, when I look at you, you're like the perfect example of a man who came from nothing and has just like, you're just such an incredible man. You're so sharp. And I've just seen so much freedom. So Greg, why don't you take us through your life a little bit? Where did you grow up? What was life like? What was home like for you? And Yeah, we'll just start unpacking this.
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up here, San Diego, California, where I currently reside. I grew up in a single mother home. Uh, I don't know my father. Never met my earthly father. Don't know him till this day. I'm going to be 45 on Christmas Day this year, and I'm really just thankful to, I didn't grow up in church. So church was not my background, had no grid for church, didn't have grid for Jesus. Was, heard about God, had a reverence for God, I believe, but didn't know Jesus. I mean, when I actually first got saved, I was venturing in all these different churches just to see if God was in there. I'm sure I ventured into the Catholic Church, the Mormon Church, the all these different places that I'm just in search of God. But that was not my background. Growing up,
Mm.
I'm half Hispanic and half Black. My mother's Hispanic. So a majority of my life growing up was, Hispanic culture. My grandfather was a professional mariachi. He used to tour around the world. He actually got the chance to go and do some mariachi music for the troops when they're at war with Bob Hope. And so, that
No
was his
way.
life. That was his life. That was his background. And so I grew up in that culture growing up. But a majority of my friends, obviously, we're all Black, and because I play basketball, and I grew up playing basketball at a very early age, and so, but this very single mother home, have one sister that I'm very close with. I actually have two sisters, but one that I'm actually very, very close with that I grew up with. So we had a very, very small family, man, very small family. My grandmother was
Wow.
around a lot. My grandmother actually helped raise me. And I didn't come to find this out till later on in my years, but my grandmother was illiterate. She couldn't read or write. And
Wow.
so that was always a challenge. I also remember oftentimes we wouldn't go certain places, and I would always be baffled or, didn't understand, like, why can't we go? And come to find out, again, I didn't find this out till later in life that she couldn't read or write. So it was really prohibiting her from even taking us to these different places or engaging in these different environments because she couldn't read or write. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, it was crazy, man. Like, none of my family went to college at that point. A lot of odds stacked against, someone like myself to even try to do anything. I mean, because statistically, you don't go very far.
Yeah.
And so we didn't grow up dirt poor or anything. Like, I don't want to give that, misleading impression. We weren't wealthy, but we weren't completely dirt poor. But we were maybe like a little bit below middle class,
Yeah.
and it was just a real challenge, especially when you're growing up and you're a young male, young minority male, and you have questions about everything in life, from sex to sports to
Yeah.
how to be a man, all that stuff, and I didn't have that growing up. So the challenge was there, but now I can say the hand of God was obviously on the whole journey, and I didn't come to find that out till really later on in life.
So when you were young, um, were you in a good neighborhood, bad neighborhood? Like what was your daily life like? Did you have good friends? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so I think the neighborhood I grew up in, the first initial part of my growing up, it was good at that time. Now, if you were to go to it, it would be considered a bad neighborhood.
Hmm.
But it was decent, and it was like, again, it wasn't very upscale, but it wasn't like extremely poor. Um, but it like kind of like merged and overlapped with the poor areas around because you walk one street over and it's extremely poor. You walk, so it's like you just kind of merge. And when you're growing up, honestly, you don't know if you're poor. You know what I'm
No.
saying? Like you really don't know. And then I ended up moving about when I was going into the fourth grade and moved into another neighborhood, which was actually a little bit better, and that ended up being the majority of my high school, young adult life was in that neighborhood, which was here in San Diego called North Park.
Were
And
you guys were you guys living with your grandparents?
no, my I live with my mother and my sister, and my grandmother would come over and watch us. So she lived very close by,
Mm.
where she would walk to our house every day. She would walk to our
Wow.
house and show up at a certain time. My mom would go to work. My grandmother would come and take care of us and take care, cook the food and just kind of be around. And then when my mother would come home off work, my grandmother would walk home. Sometimes if it was late, obviously we try to get her a ride, but my grandmother would walk to and from her house, and those are the days where you could walk around. Nowadays I
First.
don't know how safe it is, especially for young kids, but
Yeah.
those are the days back then. So yeah, the area I grew up in was fairly decent. There was crime here and there. People get robbed and some theft and stuff like that, stuff that you would normally deal with. But in San Diego at that time, it was pretty quiet.
Yeah. Man. Back in the day.
Back in the day, back
Yeah,
in the
back in the
day,
day.
back in the day.
What got
So
you into
yeah,
sports? What did you always love sports and love basketball? And what was that journey like for you?
no, and actually, my first love was skateboarding. I was going to be a
No
professional
way.
a professional skater, and I was actually a really good skateboarder. Like I was rising pretty quickly in that whole scheme of things because Southern California, you know, for all you who I'm dating myself, but you guys, for all you vintage folks out there, retro folks, town and country, surfboards and skate shop, that all origined out of, down here and in Southern California. And I was, quickly becoming a really good skateboarder. So I was going to become a professional skater. And I would play sports here and there, but I didn't have like a real passion to play any type of sports.
Wow.
And then the first sport I actually got introduced to, apart from skateboarding, and skateboarding wasn't even a sport back then. It was just kind of evolving and blooming. Now it's a full blown culture.
Yeah.
But my first sport was baseball, and I was a pitcher, and I was a really good pitcher. I had a really strong arm, and I was having a lot of success in baseball. And so I was like, you know what? I'm gonna become a professional baseball player slash skateboarder. Well, one day I was riding my skateboard and we were going to a friend's house down by my old house where I used to live. And they had the really steep hills. And so, you young kid, you little rambunctious and got a lot of zeal. I decided to get on the skateboard and go straight downhill and ride the hill. And so I'm riding the hill and, I hit this bump with my skateboard and the skateboard stops. I go flying off face first, hit the pavement, tumble all the way down the hill, get up, and I broke my collarbone. And so I shattered my collarbone. It was all messed up. And the thing was, I was supposed to pitch that day at my baseball game. Later on that day, I was supposed to pitch, and it was like my debut. Like, hey, you're the guy, you're the pitcher. We want
Dang.
to get behind you. And I couldn't pitch, and it really broke my heart. I was like, oh man, I want to do this, and I just lost all passion for skateboarding and baseball at that point,
Wow.
and it just kind of sucked it all out of me. And then that's when I decided to pick up a basketball after I rehabbed my collarbone.
Dang.
Yeah.
So what was that journey like picking up a ball? Like, I mean, because obviously you got to the point where you're playing pro ball. Like, did you have a natural talent for basketball like you did baseball and in skateboarding?
Heck no, I was terrible when I was young. I was terrible. I was very overweight, real pudgy. Um,
I can see that,
um,
bro.
yeah, you can see it. You can see it. I have deep down inside of me, I have a young obese boy who likes to eat. We keep him caged by
Yeah.
working out. It's like the Incredible Hulk type of
Yeah,
thing.
bro.
Say. So, no, all jokes aside, I wasn't very good at all. I wasn't. I was really out of shape. I was really heavy, so it made it really hard to get up and down the court. I had a really big butt, so I'm like dragging this big old butt up and down the court, which made it super hard on my knees and my legs. It was grueling, grueling, grueling. And but I liked to play, and then I liked having friends, like going to something and being with other
Mm.
kids. And I picked up a basketball probably around fourth grade, and didn't I wasn't playing organized or nothing, just playing at school. And I was actually decent, but I wasn't like really good. And then fast forward all the way, I got to seventh grade, eighth grade, ninth grade. They finally have tryouts. If you want to make a team, it was called YBA, Youth Basketball Association at the time. And I was like, you know what, let me try. And I ended up making the team. And, there was guys on the team that are way better than me. I was kind of more of like a bench warmer, didn't really play. But I just love the camaraderie and I love like going and being around different guys because again, I didn't have any brothers growing up.
Mm.
My only sibling was my sister who was older. So it was like for me, it was almost kind of like a family thing. Like I can go and I can be involved with other kids my age and play. And, nowadays kids who want to pick up a basketball and get involved at early age, there's so much resource and
Yeah.
there's so many opportunities and it's just exploded. Like there, you have every opportunity to be really good. But for me, it was just more so community and I like to play. And then it kind of went from there. Growing up and in Southern California, basketball was not like a very popular sport. It was more skateboarding, baseball, football, because they had the Chargers here at the time, and
Oh yeah.
and so that was my whole upbringing. And funny enough, is my mom worked for the San Diego Chargers. She used to do security at the football games. So I
Like
used to go
tackle
to
dudes?
all,
Was your mom tackling guys or what?
nah, she was the one just sitting there, making sure none of the fans do nothing crazy. So, so my daycare on Sundays were the football games because she had to go to work. So she would tell me, "Hey, show up to the football game, sit right in the front where I can see you, and don't go nowhere. And
No
occasionally,
way.
I'll give you some money. You can get a hot dog or something." So I would go and I would just sit and watch football games be at the Charger games and seeing all the greats, and this is the 80s. And so, I'm seeing Dan Fouts and, I'm seeing all these legends play. And I didn't think nothing of it, but looking back, it was definitely a gift to do that. So I grew up around sports is the whole point of the story.
Bro, like we don't even have those good of tickets now.
Tell me about it. Tell me about it. You don't
Gosh
get those
dang.
to. I know. And she did the old switcheroo at the time. She would, buy a magazine, put a couple passes in the magazine, and then hand me the magazine, and I would take the passes out and come into the game. We had a little system going on back then,
Yeah.
all the way back in the 80s. But it
Bro.
was it was crazy. I just remember sitting front row every Sunday watching whoever the Chargers were playing at the time. And so I kind of grew up there between that and the beach, like being at the beach,
Yeah.
sitting at the beach all day. Those were my daycares, when
Bro.
my grandmother couldn't watch me.
That's wild. Yeah.
Hmm.
Tough life, huh?
Yeah, super
Chargers
tough.
on Sunday and beach Monday through Saturday. That's
Yeah, man.
legit. I
Yeah, it was
love it.
cool.
So at what point, like at what point in your life did you realize I don't have a dad and everyone else has a dad? Like, did you ever have that? Or, I mean, I know growing up, whatever your normal is growing up feels pretty normal, but did you ever realize like, man, I'm missing something? Or was life just like, no, this is all good. I don't even miss my dad.
Yeah, I think it wasn't like a consistent I miss my dad. It was more like certain moments where, where's my dad or who is my dad or do I have a dad? I would say the majority of the time I didn't necessarily think about it because my mother did work really hard to make sure that I didn't have
Hmm.
anything, like I didn't have any lack.
Hmm.
She worked really, really hard. And so it was you know, shout out to my mom, who I love very deeply. She did her best. My grandmother as well. She's no longer alive, but she worked really hard because there wasn't very much male figure in my life. Like my uncle wasn't very much in my life. The people that would come around, men that would come around, it was very brief. And so certain moments I would be like, oh man, I wish I had a male presence in my life.
Hmm.
And then certain moments, like for the majority of the part, I didn't really even recognize it. I would recognize it, when other dads would show up to like guys' games or, we'd be
Hmm.
playing and their dad be in the stands. And, to be very honest with you, I didn't really know what it looked like for another man to love a young son. So it was
Hmm.
like kind of void in my life. So later on, when I got older, not only did I have to learn how to do that for myself with my own children,
Hmm.
but I had to learn how to receive it from another man, you know what I'm saying? Like unconditional, like, hey man, I love you. And, all that came when I came and gave my life to the Lord, that all that started being transformed, which is later down the line.
It's interesting because you do that so naturally. I mean, I know you, and we spent some time together, and for a while now, and like you so easily just like for starters, I can see the Hispanic culture, because Hispanics do family like no other. It's just like it's all inclusive. But when I look at you, like if I didn't know any better, I wouldn't know that. Like you had to learn that later on in your life. You've done a lot of work in that area of learning how to receive love, and then also how to give that. Was that a pretty big journey in your life?
Absolutely. It was actually very difficult, because I majority of my younger life, all that area was super guarded because it was tender. Like no one's ever infiltrated that. And then the men that actually did come in my life, they never really stuck or stayed. So I didn't have like too many like great examples of what it looked like to be a healthy man in someone's life, or, to be able to speak into someone's life. There was instances here and there. And what I found myself doing when I was young, as I later reflect back on my youth, is the men who did come around, or the men that I were engaged with, whether it was a coach in basketball or a friend or one of my mother's friends or something, I found that I created this almost somewhat of a defense mechanism. And I don't know if I necessarily did it intentionally, but what I would do is I would take the best attribute out of every male that I encountered or met. And in my mind and in my heart, I would say to myself, if I have children and I get older, that this father figure that was void in my life will look like this. Like he would be funny, he would be patient, he would have, vision, ambition, he would champion, he would be encouraging, all these things that I would see in all these different people that I interacted with men wise. I would take that attribute and compile what I thought a dad should look like. And come to find out, later again, when I gave my life to Jesus and I started to see God the Father, that's when God told me all that complete conglomerate of attributes is a reflection of him,
Wow.
But I didn't know that at the time when I was doing it when I was young.
Yeah, that's awesome. Take us through a little bit of your professional career, and then I also want to dive into a little bit of how you found God in all of
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. So I went to high school here in San Diego, and then I ended up getting a college scholarship to a Division II school in Cal Poly Pomona in California. But my dream in Miami. Well, first of all, it was a great feat. The fact that I was getting my college paid for, fully paid for, and I didn't have to do it myself, and I didn't have to pay for it. My mother didn't have to pay for it. Was a feat within its own.
Yeah.
But I wasn't satisfied. I wanted to, I didn't know God at the time. I didn't have a relationship with God. And so I had more ambition to play what they call Division I basketball. And this was a Division II school. I wanted to play Division I, which is a step higher.
Yeah.
And so in order for me to do that, I had to transfer to a junior college and then go back to a Division I school. They call it a 4-2-4, 4-year school to a 2-year school to a 4-year school. And so I ended up doing that. Mind you, at the time, I was a big weed smoker. I was smoking a lot of weed. I would stay in shape. I would be in shape, but I was just, I was a weed smoker, womanizer, you know what I'm saying? Sleeping with girls. Just that was my life at the time. So I would sleep with girls, smoke weed, play basketball, go to school. That was what I did. Listen to hip
Wow.
hop music. That was my life. And so when I ended up transferring to College of the Desert in Palm Desert, California, same deal, same thing, same lifestyle, just in another area. Played really good. Ended up having a stellar career in junior college. One of the number one recruited players in junior college during that time, in all of the America. So I had a lot of up promise. but this is probably the first time I ever really had some interaction with God. And at that time, um, I was just sleeping with a bunch of girls and smoking weed. And I this was probably the first prayer I prayed that I actually remembered, like, God answering, like, outright. And the prayer was like, God, I'm tired of sleeping with all these chicken heads. That's, promiscuous women. Give me a woman that I could call my wife. And that was my first prayer that I can
Wow.
actually really remember. And 2 weeks later, I lived with two other girls and one other guy. It was four of us in an apartment. And 2 weeks later, a girl came and knocked on her door. She was looking for one of her friends who was another friend of one of the girls that I live with. And that woman ended up becoming my wife. She's my wife now. You
Holy
know,
smokes.
that's how I met my wife. And so, she was not raised in the church. She had no church background. She's not even from that area. And she actually came and looking for one of her friends. And, this was over 23 years ago. And now here we are, married, been together for over 23 years. And that was a starting point. So
Was
then,
she
to,
saved when you guys when you guys met?
absolutely not. Neither of us were. We didn't know God at all. Like, her family didn't know God. My family didn't know God. I had, like, I knew there was a God, but I, don't know his name. I have no grid for that. So that happened, and I met her, and I ended up doing 2 years there. Went to a Division I school in Kentucky, Morehead State University, and played there. It's a great school. Ended up graduating, and I did the long distance thing. My girl at the time, who's now my wife, she stayed back here in California. I would go to school in Kentucky, and then when I would come back during off season, she would just be with me. And so we did it that way. So being apart from each other was really, like, early on our relationship. So we knew
Mhm.
how to do that early on. And how God made it that way was just so brilliant, because it ended up being like a basis of in our foundation of our relationship as I became a professional. Once I graduated college, I went into the professional scene, and my first job, professional basketball, my first job was in Brazil. So I lived in Brazil my first year, and it's crazy because that's when 9/11 happened. So nine
Oh
eleven
wow.
happened, and 9/11 happened in September. The next month, in October, they opened the airport, and I actually flew to Brazil. So I was just coming fresh out of what happened here in
Mhm.
America in 9/11, and got to Brazil, and that was my first professional job, was playing in the Brazilian league down in Brazil. And I remember the brothers and sisters down there. First thing they said is like, "Hey, we're so sorry for your loss." They were very
Wow.
compassionate. "Hey, we're so sorry for your loss. We're sorry that your country got attacked. We're glad that you're here." And it was my first, honestly, my first opportunity to get out the country and play. But I did a really good job. And here's the crazy part. This is when I started to see, like God was gripping me, but I didn't know, I didn't have language for it.
Mhm.
And I would pray a lot, and I felt like I had a reverence. And at that time, you're in Brazil. I mean, beautiful women everywhere,
Yeah.
and they're tempting you. You're playing basketball, and I would get tempted all the time, but just something was gripping me, like, no, that's not the right thing to do. Like, you need to stay focused. You need to stay focused. And I really was just focusing in on just, being present with God. And again, didn't have the language. And I ended up playing like one of my best seasons at that point. And came back. My wife had just got pregnant. We were having our first son. So I was able to fly home, and man, it just kind of took off from there, man. And there was I would say there's a whole lot more lows than there were highs playing professional basketball, especially playing overseas. Um, and in the middle of that, I ended up tearing my knee in that 8 year span. I tore my
Mhm.
knee, I tore my ACL, and I had to sit out. And I thought that, just like most people who have injuries, like, man, this is it.
Yeah.
And in that moment, though, I had been working out with the Seattle Supersonics during the summer. So I was playing against all their players. I knew their coaches. I knew their training staff. And so the year I tore my knee, I was rehabbing down at the training facility. So I couldn't really play, but I was just around. And the coach at the time, his name was Bob Hill. And I remember just asking him to say, hey, coach, I can't play this season. I'm not going to be able to go anywhere. Is there anything I could do to help you? I would love to just be a part of what you're doing. That's what I told him. Essentially, in Christianese or Christian terms, hey, I just want to serve you.
How can I serve?
Yeah, how can I serve? And he was like, hey, man, show up to this camp that I'm doing for these coaches and just help me with it. All right, cool. So I ended up showing and doing like some demonstration stuff. And he was like, all right, I'll see you on Monday at training camp. And, that was his way of inviting me to come be a part of the NBA.
Wow.
And I was like, again, not having a father, not being like, not having an understanding when men extend love to you, I took it as this guy's lying to me and he's not
Wow.
serious. And you know what? I'm not going to go. So the first day when he invited me, I didn't go because I thought he was lying to me.
Wow.
And so I stayed home and I was working overnight job at the time. I was living in Washington, obviously. And I looked online to see the training camp. And I was like, man, I was just there yesterday or 2 days ago. And now it's the NBA season starting. And I'm thinking to myself, man, I should be there. He invited me. But something deep down in me was like, this man's lying to you. Don't trust him. You shouldn't go. You're going to go and you're going to get there and you're going to be made a fool of. He's not even going to remember who you are. Like it was just all this shame, all the stuff that, and it was kind of like coming out of a place of not having a father, like a
Wow.
healthy father. And so the next day I was like, you know what? I got to go. And even if it doesn't work, then I've just got to try. So I ended up driving down there, and it was about an hour and a half away from where I lived to where the Seattle Supersonics practice was about an hour and a half away. So I had to drive every day. And I get down there and I walk into the lobby, and the receptionist guy, who I just saw 2 days ago, goes, "Can I help you?" And he act like he didn't even know me, like, and I was just like, "See, I knew it, all the stuff I was thinking is right." And I was like, "Well, yeah, Coach Hill told me to come, and he wants me to help with training camp, and I'm a part of the team now." And he looked at me, kind of gave me this like almost kind of like condescending look, like, "Yeah, okay, all right." Well, he goes, "Okay, well, hold on a minute, sit right there, and let me go get the coach." And I'm thinking to myself, what did I do, man? This is terrible. I can't believe all the shame and all of the
Yeah.
guilt and all of the everything was just welling up. And so the coach comes down the stairs. He walks down and he sees me. And the first thing he says, he goes, "Where the F were you at yesterday?" I go, I was sick. I lied, said something. He goes, "Well, you feeling better?" I said, "Yeah, I'm feeling better." He goes, "All right, get to work. You ready?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Get in there." And that's how my opportunity in the NBA started.
Wow, that's crazy. So
Yeah.
did that start like that camp? Did you get on the team at that point as a trainer, or what happened after that?
Right. So I came in and it's funny because all those guys that were in camp I played against. So they were my friends. Even the best player at the time was Ray Allen, who's one of the greatest shooters ever to play basketball. He's there. He's my friend. Like I know him. I talk to him. And so when I walked in, they were like, "Yo, Greg, what's up, man?" It wasn't even like, "Who's that?" It was like, "Hey, come on." And so when I came in, they're like, "What you doing here?" I was like, "Well, I'm gonna help out with the team." They were like, "Cool, come help me work out." So I would go work guys out, like rebound for them, running through drills, do stuff with them, help them shoot, all the stuff that I did as a player, and I knew what they had to do as a player. It was easy for me to plug in because I know how to be that other guy to help them get better because I know what helped me to
Yeah.
get better. So it was an easy transition. And I had rapport with them. So it wasn't like I had to build
Yeah.
friendship and equity and all that stuff. And so, I get in there. There's other coaches in there, and you could tell they're kind of looking at me like, yo, what's he doing here? And, a lot of these guys worked their tails off to be there at that point. And I just kind of come in because Coach Hill gave me a chance. Well, I went in there, I just worked hard and just served and helped guys get better. And the crazy part was that I had relationship with the guys. So I can sit in the locker room and hear their pain and their why they're upset and all of that stuff. And then I can go sit. I was cerebral enough to sit in a coaches meeting and see, talk X and O's and
Yeah.
strategy and all that stuff. And so I had like a really crazy niche on this team. So the first game of the season comes, and I didn't travel with the team. I just did all home games because I had a regular job. This was, I was a volunteer assistant coach. They ain't pay me no money, but you
Yep.
can't buy that experience of
Yep.
what I'm doing. So the first game happens, and I show up to the game, and I walk into the locker room. All the players are in the locker room, and there's three lockers. One locker in the middle is empty, and on each side of the locker is the two best players. So they sit next to each other. And there's one locker in the middle. So I walk into the locker room and I go, whose locker is this? And Ray Allen goes, oh, take that, Brad. That's your locker. Sit right there. So they gave me a locker in between Rashard Lewis, who was the second best player, and Ray Allen, who was the best player. So I sat in between both of them for the entire season. That was my locker.
That's
and so
amazing.
and so so I remember one game, we played the game, we win, whatever. This goes on throughout the year. And I would just kind of give insight based on hearing their conversation. I would go to the coach and be like, hey, don't do this. Hey, you should try this. And I was giving him information that was actually helping us win and helping him make decisions during the game, to the point where after one of the games, I remember this like it was yesterday. After one of the games, I walk out and I'm in the hallway of the locker room, and everybody's doing an interview, and the coach is doing an interview. And I walk past him, and he stops me, and he's like concluding his interview. And then he tells the reporter, he said, you see this young guy right here? This is an amazing guy right here. He's gonna be a great coach one day. You should listen, you should interview him. And he walked away. And I was like, whoa, and again, all this is foreign to me, man, because I've never had an older man at that,
Yeah.
confirming me
Yeah.
that I had any good, you know what I'm saying? Or I had
Yeah.
a future, or as we like to say, call the gold out. He called the gold out in me, come to find out that I ended up not becoming a professional coach. I became an eternal coach, I would consider myself an eternal coach, and it actually started from this guy over here, you know what I'm saying? Actually showing me what that looks like.
Man, that's awesome. So, at what point in your life did you find God?
Great question. So that year when I coached with Seattle. There was one guy on the team. His name was Mike Wilkes. And he had won a championship in San Antonio. He's actually an NBA head coach, not head coach, excuse me. He's an assistant coach right now in the NBA. Very close friend of mine, brother. And I saw him, man. And when I saw him live what he received in his life, who he was living for, I saw him living it out. He didn't preach to me. He didn't open the Bible to me. We just talked about God. And he told me about his relationship with God. And I started to see him. Now, granted, this dude, he would work hard. He would never play. He would play here and there. And he was really good. But the politics. And so one game we played the Lakers. We were playing the Lakers, and we were getting beat pretty bad. And Kobe Bryant was killing us, man. This is Kobe had just, late great Kobe Bryant came back. He came back off like a knee surgery, and he was beating us on one leg basically because he was getting it strong again. This is
Jeez.
when they had Shaq, and they had an amazing team. But something happened during that game that I'll never forget, and I actually wrote about it in my book, um, that's coming out here on in December. And we were playing, and my friend who was a Christian was just super positive, very encouraging, and come on, guys, you could do it, you could do it, keep working hard, keep working hard. And this goes on. He's doing this for like throughout the whole game, really. But there was like a 10-minute stretch, and then there was another guy on the team who he was a good dude, but he had like a really, really bad attitude. And
Mm.
nobody on the team really wanted to confront him because he was 6'8", 280. So he was a big dude. And he was not afraid to punch you in your mouth, man. So he's not afraid like confrontation. So a lot of guys didn't really want to talk to him. So my friend's like, yo, man, come on, guys, you could do it, you could do it. And then the other guy was like, hey, man, he was like, man, shut up, man. How can you cheer for this stuff? And, this is terrible. We getting beat. And this goes on for like 10 minutes. And then towards the end of that 10 minutes, he's like, man, shut up, man. And now he's cussing and it's getting louder and the fans can hear it. And I'm sitting like right at the baseline so I can see the bench and I can see the game. And I'm like, oh man, they're about to get in a fight. Like I'm not even paying attention to the game no more. I'm actually paying attention to what they're doing. And so what my friend did in this moment, I'll never forget, man. And it marked me. And it went like this. He was like, come on, guys, you could do it, you could do it. And the other dude's like, man, shut up, man. How can you cheer for this? And my friend, without even breaking stride, turned directly to him, looked him in his face because they were sitting next to each other. And he was like, because Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior. And if you knew Jesus Christ, you wouldn't have that type of attitude and you'd be cheering for your teammates. Come on, guys, let's go. And he just went right back into cheering for these guys. And my mouth was on the floor. I was just like, oh my God. And it shut that big dude, it shut him up completely. Like he stopped
Wow.
talking. It like stopped him in his tracks. And like I'm looking at him, like I have my face looking at him, and he kind of like turns and catches me looking at this whole thing. I like kind of like look away, like I'm not paying attention. And I was just like, man. And from that moment, that was something that was the seed that got planted in my heart. Because I was like, man, if this dude, he didn't say one thing, he didn't read the one scripture to me, he
Yeah.
didn't open the Bible to me, he just lived it. He lived it, bro. And I said, if I can have what that man has, then I'm gonna have something in my life.
Mm.
And that was in 2000, like 2004, I believe, 2003, 2004. But I didn't come to faith until 2009. And so,
Wow.
but that seed was in me of how he lived his life. And I never forgot that, man. I never ever forgot that. I mean, till this day, I never forgot that. And that was actually the catalytic turning point, is seeing him live like that. And then in 2009, I had this whole encounter with God at that point.
That's wild.
Hmm.
It's crazy how we have these key turning points in our life that we often think like it's the, you got to preach the message to somebody or, quote the scriptures or whatever. But man, so much more is caught than taught, right? So much more. People are watching our lives so much more than they even want to hear us talk. And I just love that guy lived his life. And at some point you just went like, man, I got to change my life. I got to, what was like the key turning point for you to decide like, I have to give my life to God?
Yeah, good question. Again, I wrote, I believe I wrote about this in my book as well. It's like, so 2009 is my last year playing professionally, and I was in the Ukraine. I was playing in Ukraine at the time. I was living in Kiev, Ukraine, and things weren't going as well as I wanted them to go. I mean, I just came back, I rehabbed my knee. I was playing, I was working out, I was waiting, and the team that I went to play for essentially didn't want me. And
Hmm.
so I was in Kiev waiting for another opportunity to go to another country as my agent worked something out. And so I was getting really frustrated, man, because I'm like, man, I'm doing everything I can. I was actually at that point, I was reading the Bible, even though I wasn't retaining anything I was reading. I was just reading it.
Wow.
Okay, God, you're gonna show up. God, you're gonna, and I didn't. Again, I didn't say any prayer. I didn't say. I was just like, okay, God, I believe in you. I believe in you. I believe in you. Are you gonna show up? You're gonna show up. But there was another half of me that wasn't fully surrendered to God, which was the half of for the ladies and all that stuff. And so, I'm in a very low moment, man, because nothing's working out. At this point, I have two sons at home. My income is low. I'm not making really any money because I'm waiting. I'm sitting there, and it's just one of those valley of the shadow of death moments. You're in
Hmm.
that valley, man. It's like, oh God, you gonna show up? And again, didn't really have a grip for God. Well, in the hotel I was staying, there'll be certain people come in. This woman happened to actually come in at the time. Long story short, I ended up sleeping with her. And it really I was really just disappointed in myself because at that point I felt that I had grown away from that no longer had any type of foothold or stronghold over my life. And I remember we had got done having sex, and she rolled over and she said, "Tell me you love me." And I just looked her straight in her face and I said, "I don't even love myself.
Hmm.
I don't love myself. I don't care about myself. I don't love myself. So I can't tell you that I'm sorry." I left. I ended up not working out. I get on a plane. I'm flying back home. And at that point, I knew I was like, my career is over. Like, I'm done playing basketball. I don't want to do this anymore. I have no passion for it anymore. I'm done. Like, and I'm not even happy. I played all these places. I made a little bit of money. I've seen some stuff, met ton of people, but I'm not happy. I'm coming
Hmm.
home. I have two boys at home at this point, two young boys. I have a woman who has not left me, who's been faithful to me. What am I doing? Like, this is terrible. Like, I'm wasting my life, and there has to be more. Well, the beauty of it is I still had they did a bunch of layoffs at the job that I had at the time, but they didn't lay me off, even though I was gone for like 3 months.
Wow.
They kept me on. So I actually went back to work, and I was an overnight security guard at a really high-end golf resort in Washington State. And I was sitting at work one night, middle of the night, or actually early morning, about 2 in the morning, and I called my friend, and he was actually on track to become a pastor, but he stopped and he walked away from his faith. So he was really the only person I knew that was actually going down the road of potentially becoming a pastor.
Yeah.
I didn't know any pastors. And so I called him. I said, "Hey, bro, we lived in San Diego at the time, and I was here and I was in Washington State." And I said, "Hey, man, you was gonna become a pastor. Tell me about that. Like, what does it take to become a pastor?" And he started talking to me and about God. And he's like, "Yeah, but I'm walking away though, man." He goes, "But you know what, man? You should check out this one church, man. I think you'll like it." I was like, "For real? What's it called?" He's like, "It's called the Rock Church." He said, "The pastor's funny. You know what I'm saying? He's a former athlete. I think you would like it, man." And I was like, "Well, I like to laugh and I play sports. You have me sold." He's like, "Cool. Go online and just look it up." All right, cool. So I go online and I look up a couple, they have an archive of the sermons. So I watched one, it was good. Watch the second one, it was real good. Watch the third one, and at the end, he's an evangelist. So he's all about saving souls and, pray to prayer. And that's your entry point, essentially.
Yeah.
And so by the third one, I stand up in the middle of work on an online service, recorded online service, and I said, "Jesus, I make you my Lord and Savior. Come into my life. I give you my life for real. Like, I'm not turning back. Like, I'm really saying yes to you. I'm gonna say yes to you, and I'm not turning back. You have my full yes." And this bright light came into the room, bro, and my heart started racing. And I thought I was having a heart attack, you know what I mean? Or I didn't know what was going on, but I didn't feel like a threat. It didn't feel like a threat. I just like my body was getting out of whack. I started sweating, and then I started crying, like uncontrollably crying. And it wasn't like a sad cry. It was a cry like everything that was wrong about me was being unwound from within me.
Wow.
Like like I was not like I was no longer shame, no longer guilt, no longer, a liar, no longer manipulator, no longer all these things that started unwinding. I'm just sitting there crying, crying. And this goes on. It felt like 30 minutes, but it was really only like 5. And I'm just sitting there and the light comes out of the room. I'm back at work, a sobbing mess. I was like, I think I just gave my life to Jesus.
No way.
I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm saved. So, work concludes. I get off at about 7:30 in the morning. I come home and I tell she was my girlfriend at the time. We were living together, but we weren't married, and we had 2 children. And I come home, I said, I gave my life to Jesus. And she was like, what does that mean? And I was like, I don't know. I said, but I heard God said, get on a plane and go meet this pastor. So I booked my ticket and I'm leaving in 2 weeks. And she was like, so God's speaking to you? I was like, yeah, it's weird.
Bro.
And she was like, and she got mad. She was like, what's he saying about me then, if he's speaking to you? I was like, I don't know. He didn't say nothing about you. He just told me to get on the plane and go meet this pastor. And she was like, okay, whatever. And so 2 weeks later, bro, I go down to San Diego. Well, first I call my friend. I'm like, hey man, I'm coming home. He's like, oh, cool, bro. He's like, man, we're gonna go to the club. I got all this stuff set up, man. We're gonna have a good time. I said, no, 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 no. I said, I only want to do 2 things when I come into San Diego. He's like, what's that? I said, one, I want to go to the gym and I want to play some hoop on Saturday. He's like, okay, bet, man. I'm gonna call all the homies, all the guys, let them know you back in town. Cause mind you, I play professional basketball. I coached in the NBA, so I had a bit of a reputation, and all the guys knew I was like in that circle. He's like, cool, I'm gonna get everybody in the gym. We're gonna go hoop. All right, great. And he said, what's the second thing? I said, I want to go to church on Sunday because I'm gonna go meet the pastor of the church. And he goes, you gonna meet the pastor? Did he invite you? I said, no. God told me to get on the plane and go meet him. And he starts laughing at me really loudly. And he goes, it don't work like that, bro. You just don't show up to the church and you meet the pastor, especially him. He goes, that's a big church. I was like, no, you don't understand. Like God told me to go talk to this man. And he was like, are you sure, man? He was like, well, all right, man, we'll go. But don't be disappointed if he don't show up because sometimes he's not there. I was like, whatever. So I fly down to San Diego, bro. First day, Saturday, we go to the gym. All my friends, all of my competitors that I played against in high school, they're in the gym. Greg, what's up, man? Oh, man, good to see you, bro. Man, we heard you play here and you coached here and, man, you look good. And, and I'm in there like dominating because I'm still in shape. You know what I'm saying? Like I still play. And so they're like, yo, man, what's up? We going to go? I said, nah, man. I said, matter of fact, you should come to church with me tomorrow. Matter of fact, have you asked Jesus Christ to be your Lord and Savior?
No way.
They're looking at me like an alien. They're like, who are you, man? Like, I'm like, hey, man, you need to give your life to Jesus, man. Seriously, or you going to go to hell? Like, that was my evangelistic speech.
Bro, that's amazing.
I was like, you're going to go to hell if you don't give your life to Jesus. And they're looking at me like, man, shut up, man. Like, we're not going to church with you tomorrow. I said, brother, you got to come. I said, bro, you got to come with me. And I'm like, bro, you got to come with me, man. If you don't give your life to Jesus, you're going to hell. And they're like, man, we're not going to church, man. We love you, bro. But, man, who are you? We don't even know you no more. I was like, well, listen, I'm going to church tomorrow. Meet me there if you want to come. Otherwise, you're gonna probably go to hell. So I'm gonna pray for you. That was my evangelistic speech.
That's amazing.
So the next day we go to church. It was me, my friend, and another mutual friend of mine who is actually like one of my best friends now. He shows up. So we go, we sit front row, bro. Pastor Miles comes out and he's actually there. And I'm like, oh my God, dude's here. Cool. I'm gonna meet him. So he preaches, he gets done, he comes and sits, he stands at the side of the stage, and there is a sea of people trying to talk to this dude. I mean, your
Yep.
dad is admitting, you know how it is when a ton of people want to talk to you, and you're that guy at the back of the line. And I'm just sitting there, and all I see is just a group of people trying to talk to this man, and I'm starting to get frustrated. And I'm like, man, and I said these exact words. I was like, man, God, you told me to come down here, and you want me to talk to this man. Make it happen, just like that, verbatim. And I turn around, and then I turn back around, and nobody's standing there. And he's standing there looking at me with his arms crossed like this. So I was like, okay. So I walk right up to him, and I go, hey, Pastor Miles. He goes, hey, what's going on, bro? You know, he's like messing with me. What's up, young blood? What's going on? What's going on? How's it, everything? What's going on? I was like, hey, God told me to come down here because he told me he wanted, you need to pray for me, and then I'm going into ministry. I don't even know what that means. What does that mean? Ministry? And he was like, how old are you, young blood? I was like, oh man, you know, at the time I was like 30 something. He was like, I'm gonna be 50. Can you believe that? I'm gonna be 50 years old this year. But I look good though. Don't I look good? Don't I look good? You know, and he's like messing with me. He's like fixing my clothes. And I was like, yeah. He's like, hey, have you asked Jesus Christ to be your Lord and Savior? I said, yeah, I have. He's like, oh man, you saved. I was like, okay, yeah. I said, yeah, I said the prayer and everything. I said, yeah, I believe I'm saved. He was like, okay. He's like, well, let me pray for you. Cool. So he puts his hands on me like this. I put my hands on him like this, and we're linked over like this, bro.
That's amazing.
And the first thing that shoots through my mind is, I wish I had a picture of this because this is something that's monumental in my life and bigger than what I can even explain right now.
Yeah.
So I was like, dang. All right. Well, didn't get the picture. So we get done. He gets done. He goes, hey, stay in contact. Pray you're good. You know, hope everything goes well. Let us know how things are going. And he takes off. So I'm like, okay, well, that happened, you know. And so I turn around, and me and my friends are walking out the church. And as we're going up the thing, this woman walks up on us, and she was a PR lady for the church. She goes, hey, I'm such and such with the Rock Church. The LA Times is writing a front page article on our church, and they want to know if they can use this picture. And they flip the camera around, and it's me and him like this, bro, linked over praying. And I go, dang, God, does it work that quick? I didn't even say anything. Like, I just thought that, you know, they like that picture, you could Google it, go online. It's like, it was on the front page of the LA Times. They wrote this huge article. And so I got the picture. And then from that point forward, man, I started walking with God.
So did you tell your girlfriend the same thing? Did you come home and be like, hey, listen, you're probably going to go to hell unless you accept God into your heart? Like, what was that journey? Just give us like the 3-minute version of that.
Nah, it was like, honestly, it was hard for me because it was a lot of like, I'm watching you, you know, like, are you really a changed person? I'm watching you. And I'm actually waiting for you to make a mistake to say, I told you so. Wow. That's what it was. So it was really, really hard. And not only that, her family all lived in the town that we were living in. And so they all knew me up until a certain point, smoking weed, drinking, hanging out, doing all the, like, they knew the old person very well, but they didn't know the new person. And matter of fact, they didn't even have a grid for why I was new. So it's like double lifting. And what I ended up doing is just like, I started to change my life. Like I used the model from my friend from the Seattle Supersonics, as opposed from just preaching and reading the Bible. Like I just like, okay, my life is going to speak more volumes than anything I could tell you. Let me just change my life around. So I stopped listening to the music I was listening to. I stopped, because one of my biggest hangs ups, I had a real bad mouth. So I cussed a lot. And
Hmm.
so I had a real problem with my mouth. I was verbally handicapped. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like I was verbally disabled. Like I didn't know how to express myself without saying the F word or this word or that
Yeah.
word. And so, and what God showed me was that it was through the music I was listening to. So I changed the music I was listening to for a whole year and a half. And so my life changed, which allowed me to speak to my wife about her life having potential change. You know what I'm
Wow.
saying? Just had to model it before I can even speak it.
And so at some point, at what point did she come to you and be like, I want to do this?
Well, it didn't happen. So what ended up happening was, we had transformation. Now, mind you, we weren't married at this time. And so um one day I came to her and was like, hey, because I got confirmation that I could marry her. And I came to her and said, hey, give my life to God. I'm gonna follow God all my living days. Will you marry me? And it wasn't like a romantic proposal. It was actually in our house. I
Bro.
was sitting on the couch. You know what I'm saying? Like it was not no romantic, it wasn't nothing like that. Cause I didn't know, again, no one taught me how to do this.
Yeah.
Like another man, I
Yeah.
didn't know that, for a man to court a woman, none of that was taught to me. So I was just sitting on the couch like, hey, I gave my life to God and things are changing. And, I believe I have permission now to marry you. Do you want to get married? And the first thing she said is, why you want to get married? We've been together. We have two kids. Like, why you want to get married? And I was like, well, I love you and I'm going to follow God all my living days. And his word says this, the Bible says this about marriage, and I'm committing to you like I committed to God. Do you want to get married? And she was like, oh, well, and it wasn't no clear yes. It wasn't none of that.
Bro.
It was like, oh, well, what I'm saying? Like it was like that. It wasn't nothing, like spectacular or anything. And so we ended up getting married. And here's how I knew, because I knew I didn't want to marry my wife prior to me not having a relationship with God, because I knew how I would treat her. That was the
Oh,
whole thing. I knew that. And once I gave my life to God, God actually spoke to me and said, you have permission to marry my daughter now.
wow. That's cool.
You have permission to marry my daughter now. And I was like, okay. And so we ended up getting married. And once we got married, they started seeing my life transform and things started happening. Well, at that point, um, I was going to Africa every year, Nigeria primarily. I was going to Nigeria, Africa for the last 4 years and doing ministry work out there. And I got offered an opportunity to move back to San Diego. Mind you, I became like the most popular figure in this very small town, very similar to Weaverville. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
2,000 people, all white town, no black people. It's one of everything: one gun, one bullet, one grocery store, one black person. You know what I'm saying? Like it's one
Yeah.
town of one. And so, but I became the head basketball coach of the town, so I knew all the kids, all their families. And we were winning, and they ain't won in decades. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, but God was like, I need you to lay that down. I need you to move back to San Diego, and you're gonna get a full-time ministry. And when we moved back to San Diego, when we moved down here, that was hard, man, because her family was really giving her a hard time. Her sister, her mom, everybody's giving her a hard time. Oh, so you're gonna be a pastor's wife now, and so you're a little goody two shoes. You're not gonna mess with us no more because we smoke cigarettes and we do this and we do that and blah 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 blah. And she was really going through it, but I was like, listen, as for me and my house, we don't serve the Lord. And I didn't even know really what that scripture meant. All I knew what it said. You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah,
it
bro.
was just like, I was like, this is what we're doing. And so when we moved to San Diego, that's when she gave her life to Christ. and it actually came out of a healing. Like she got physically healed in her
Wow.
hip,
Wow.
and that was like confirmation for her. And so she gave her life to Christ. My kids ended up giving their life to Christ. Obviously, my mom got saved.
Wow.
My sister got saved. Her sister got saved. Her mom got, like, all her family knows the Lord now. All my family knows the Lord now. You know what I'm saying? Like this is our life. This is what we do, you know? And so it's
Man.
crazy to go from one end of the spectrum real hard to the whole other end of the spectrum. And I can't sit here and say there ain't been a bunch of challenges. It's been tough, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really hard because the rubber hits the road. Like, do you believe what you read? And do you believe it when you ain't got no money in the bank, and when you
Yeah.
poor, and when people in your family are sick, and when you're struggling, when you have these desires that have not died in you, lust of the flesh and all this stuff. And do you really believe this promise for your life? When
Yeah.
this person died for you, do you really believe that? And I could say, like, the more challenges and the deeper I go with God, the more I start to see that mystery is also a part of your growth as a
So
follower of
true.
Jesus. And because it keeps you in a position of childlike wonder, I think that's actually to your benefit at times. And so, man, it's been a journey, and it still is. It's been great,
That's
but
amazing,
I
man.
know that there's a whole lot more. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. That's so cool. I love your journey. Um, we're gonna finish here soon, but I just wanted to uh, hear just a few minutes about your book. And actually, we should probably do a whole podcast on your book. So don't go into it too much, but just I know you have this message that's been in your heart for a long time. You've been working on it. Just give us a little tiny bit of a preview for it, when it's going to come out, and then we'll jump back on here and do a whole podcast on it.
Yeah, December 1st. It comes out. It's up on Amazon right now for pre-order. So you can go on Amazon right now and pre-order it. The foreword's written by your pops. Your pops wrote the foreword. Chris Valentin wrote the foreword. And it's basically my story, about, it's called The Way, Truth, Life. Keys to going from victim to victory. It's a little bit about my story. And it's just little things that I've learned along the way that no one taught me, but this is something I learned that's actually been healthy. And how you can inherit, true purpose, eternal destiny, when you find and you form a great, deep relationship with God the Father, God the Son, God Holy Spirit. So it's a really authentic book for those who are seeking to be well. Again, it's my story. There's some great stories in there, some key practical things. It's written for someone who just wants to go on a journey to be well again and be healed. For those who are struggling with fatherlessness, like myself did at some point, there's some stuff in there for you as well. But I'm really excited about it. It wrote it during the pandemic. And so, I'm curious to see. Again, my whole purpose was really not to just sell a ton of books. My whole purpose was to write something that I can give to my kids and be like, hey, this is dad's life, and
Yeah,
they can give to their kids and their kids' kids. And hey, this was granddad's life. This is why we are who we are, because this is his journey, and he gave his life to God. So I
it's
think I
amazing,
think they'll enjoy it.
man. It's so cool. Well, we're gonna take some time to go through that book and check it out. And but man, your journey is inspiring. You just coming from, I mean, your story is like, it's so many of our stories, right? We live in the most fatherless generation in history, and that where our dads aren't at war, they're just not at home. And I mean, as a man who's been in your life for a little while, watching you live it out and walk it out and speak it, and I mean, it is just so, your life is such a testimony of the power of redemption, a testimony to what happens when you take ownership of your life, you get out of the victim mentality, when push past your fear, don't give yourself excuses. And it's so inspiring. And so, Greg, I'd love it if you just pray for us, pray for the men that are on here that grew up like you, guys that just need that strength, right? And some guys, we haven't even done this before, but there's probably some guys on here that listen that don't know God or aren't super solid yet, are still wandering.
Mm-hmm.
And man, we just have so much grace for that, right? Like we understand
Mm-hmm.
what that's like. And so if you would just pray like an impartation over those men and they'd encounter God, and we'll wrap this thing up.
Yeah, absolutely. Father, I just thank you for every single man, every single person that's going to listen to this podcast,
Mm-hmm.
Lord. I pray, God, that it would lend strength to those who are on a journey to seek healing, restoration, identity, God. Lord, I just pray a blessing over them, God. I pray, Lord, that they would encounter you and they would see you in all different types of expressions of who you are, God. They would see you in your word. They would see you in daily living, God. They would see you and they would see you in the lack. They would see you in hard times, Father. Give them eyes to see and
Mm-hmm.
ears to hear, Father. I pray, Lord, in the name of Jesus, a fresh restoration. And I impart to the listener and the viewer, Father, a hunger to want to be
Mm-hmm.
well, a hunger to want to go on this journey, God. Fresh courage, fresh stamina, fresh strength, God. Lord, that they would not give up, Lord. I pray that there would be a fortitude to the listener, God, to press in and press forward, God. And whatever my story lends to that journey, Lord, I pray, God, that they would inherit something to help them journey for the long haul and journey towards victory. God, we love you and we thank you for what you're doing. God, I thank you that your word says you give justice to the weak and to the fatherlessness. And as you say in Psalms 82, God, and so I pray, God, that you give justice, God, you give strength, God, that you maintain the person that has been afflicted, God, and that you would bless them. Lord, we love you, we honor you, we just say thank you for this day and our time. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Greg, thank you so much, man. You're such a blessing. And for those of you that are listening, watching, we just want to encourage you to, man, rise up above your circumstances, get some courage, be brave, and do something that you haven't done this week. Challenge yourself to get uncomfortable and put yourself out there. So guys, stay brave. Have an incredible week. Hey guys, thanks so much for listening to the BraveCo podcast. If you like this podcast, would you please rate it, review it, leave us a great comment. And if you like this episode in particular, share it with your friends and family. That helps us to spread the word. Guys, stay brave. We'll see you next week.